barely staying afloat, makes you think about survival. What is survival? The idea that there's something to survive is a scary concept, especially here, the land of the free, in America. Makes you ask, what is America? White folks, black folks, Koreans, Latinos. Are we Americans? Are we the corporation? What are we working towards? What are we working for in soul? What are the benefits? Like, will take care of me? Will I be able to feed my family? We can define hope. The fear that something may or may not happen. You gotta work together, it seems. That sounds great. Without an understanding of what that means, it just leaves us looking at what it is and defining it. It just leaves us, period. Land of the free, home of the slave, survivors.
The Negro is to be free. He must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and find the pen and ink of self-assertive manhood, his own emancipation. to hear that on your music or your rhymes. How you gon' matter if you think that you better? And cause you got some money that your water's more wetter. Ha, ha, ha. Jokes on you while you an actor. You got less influence on your kids than the average rapper. Got the nerve to walk around with your chest poked out while your daughter's getting turned out and son's getting smoked out. Man, let's get these votes out so we can get these racist folks out.
Wow, I had to lead off with that today because everybody, I'm here, and I'm here, and I'm going to share. And people have asked, why haven't I said anything yet? And there's a time and there's a place, but those that know me know I'm very strategic in the words that I will display. But welcome everybody, welcome everybody, welcome to the Throwback Thursdays with your man Rory T. Edwards. I'm going to try to keep it as energetic as possible, but today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time. Not saying that I rush through things any other Thursday, but there there are things that need to be said, and there are things that need to be learned, and there are things that need to give people the opportunity to understand what the process of changing may look like. So, welcome again, Throwback Thursdays, and today's topic is the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, when people heard that before, it was like you were in a conversation, or your parent was telling you that your behavior or something that you did was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, the meaning of that means that there were so many small things that were piled on to the back of the camel that eventually one more straw broke the camel's back. And today we are in a situation in our world that we see the results of that one more straw that has broke the camel's back. But what I want to do is I want to share with you the historical journey of why we are in this particular time. And I want to share with you that this is not new. This is not new to us. This is not new to us at all. And if we understand our historical journey and the plight of the black versus the white conversation, then we'll understand why we're in this predicament. But we'll also understand why those who many thought would never side with us have sided with us. And we see that in these protests all over the country, that it's not just blacks who are out there disputing and asking for some change about police brutality. It is those who are tired of the rhetoric, of the false information, of all of the stuff that has not made this country the country that it should be, the country that those who have the voice say it is. In their mind, it may be, but in the eyes of many, as we see in the streets of many major companies, many major cities, and some smaller cities across this country, that it's not. And we also see it globally. We see things in Africa. We see things in New Zealand. We see protests in Toronto. We see protests in Asia. We see protests all over the world because this is not something that's just this focused on in America. It's something where you have treated those who deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of where they fall in the status for which you believe qualifies people to be beneficial. All people are beneficial in the eyes of God. So as we move through that, you're going to hear me shuffle through some papers because I have a lot of information that I wrote down, and I want to share this with you in the phase for which it will have relevance to you, and I hope it does. And let me first foremost say that if you don't get an opportunity to watch this on Facebook, what you can do is you can go to my YouTube channel. Please go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, Rory T. Edwards. Everything is my name, and like. And if you didn't hear other Throwback Thursdays, please take the time out to look at those and like those also. So go to the Rory T. Edwards YouTube channel and subscribe. But let me share a story with you first and foremost. I want to say greetings, Brother Carter. What's going on, Lillian? How you doing? Uh, but let me share a story with you that I like to share. It's about a little boy who asked his parents one day that he wanted a dog. And his father and mother agreed that they will possibly get him a dog, but he was very irresponsible. He didn't clean his room. He didn't take out the trash. He didn't do the dishes. He didn't do anything his parents said. And his father said, well, when you become a little bit more responsible, maybe I'll give you an opportunity to get a dog. So the little boy used to walk home every day, and there was a guy across the street on the opposite side of the street who had purchased a little puppy. And every day, about the same time the young boy had come home from school, the guy would let the puppy out. Now, at first, the puppy would run to the fence. He wanted the attention of the little boy. When he saw him coming, he would be so elated that he saw the little boy coming. And he would run to the fence every day. And every day, that little boy would kick the fence. He would throw rocks at the little puppy. And he would do harming things to the puppy. And eventually, the puppy began to be afraid to go towards the fence when he saw the boy coming down. And as time grew on, the boy's antics became worse and worse towards this puppy. And as the puppy became a dog, the gentleman still let him out, not knowing that there was some controversy between the young boy and this puppy, who had now become a dog. And one day, as the mailman delivered his mail, he mistakenly left the gate open. He left the gate open. And so as the little boy's walking down the street, he's getting ready to go through his antics. He didn't realize that the gate to the yard was open. And he went into screaming at the dog and throwing rocks at the dog and trying to poke the dog with the stick. And the dog became so frustrated that the dog saw that the gate was open, and he ran out and he tried to attack the boy. But by the time he had attacked the boy, the owner had heard the disturbance and came out. And he called the dog and he told the dog to sit, and he called the dog back. But prior to the owner getting to the dog bit the little boy. And so the owner was like, oh my God, I don't know why this happened. He loves people. He's very friendly. I don't know why this happened. Now, all this time, the boy's father, who worked from his home, would watch the boy walk down the street. He saw the boy traumatizing his dog on a daily basis. Later on that evening, he went over to the man's house and he knocked on the door. And he said to the young man, the father of the owner of the dog, he said, sir, I want to apologize to you for my son's actions. And the man said, well, why are you apologizing to me? He says, because my dog bit your son. He says, well, I have to take responsibility. He says, because for many years, I watched my son traumatize your dog. I watched my son tease your dog. I watched my son belittle your dog every day. And I should have made a change. I should have corrected my son many years ago, but I didn't. He says, so I want you to know that we're not going to press any charges and that your dog was in the right for defending his honor. And the man said, wow, I never knew that. Now, what does that mean? Some of you understand the story. Some of you may not understand the story. I'm not equating black lives and black males to dogs, because of those who know me. Over the last 40 years, I have developed programs from Africa all the way back over to the States to help and enhance the value of African American males. So if one person is standing on the foundation of helping black males, I am one of those individuals. So I'm not equating that. What I'm trying to let people understand and what people should see is that if you continually degrade someone, you continually to mistreat someone, you continually to believe that you are better than someone, eventually that will break that's going to be the straw that will break the camel's back. Now, most people are saying this event that happened was something that was brewing. It's been brewing. Yes, it's been brewing in America for a little while. But let me give you a historical perspective on some of the uprisings that have happened in this country that many of us don't even know about, or many of us has never heard about, or many of us in our journeys, in our leadership roles, in whatever role we play as a parent, as an uncle, as an aunt, as a teacher, as whatever your profession may be, whatever God has given you the voice to be, have you shared information about that? We have never succumbed to the oppressor. We have never succumbed to the oppressor. It's the mechanisms that were put in place that have caused us to always change what has happened to us and how we will change the outcomes of us going forward. And I'm going to share that with you also. So let me tell you about a few things. What people understand is, like, regrettably, race riots have been happening in this country since the 1600s. Now, some of you believe that we were brought to this country in 1619 because that's what they shared in the historical books. But in reality, the first indentured servants, aka enslaved people, were brought here in 1555. Okay, so I want you to understand it. In 1555, those individuals were brought here, but there were people of color who were brought here prior to that, because in reality what we got to realize is that there were no borders that shaped America prior to America so-called being discovered. So it was all North America that still hadn't been carved out by some of the nature's ways of separating some of the masses of land. So we have to understand that this stuff wasn't just dropped on the earth in the form of which we see it today. There were massive earth changes that caused the land masses to be separated, and also the formation of these land masses. And so when we first were arrived over here, the masses of land were not in the formation for which they are currently. So you got to understand that there was no such thing as that we were in America. It was all North America, north of America, which really wasn't America at that particular time. So let's even understand that. There was no such thing as America. America was supposed to be named after the person who they said, Amerigo Vespucci, who discovered this. But in reality, let me explain something to you. Many hundreds of years and thousands of years before that, Africans were migrating through this whole world based on the great migration of the animals. And so that's why we see all of these particular uh, movements, and why we see depictions of African culture all over the globe. Because many years before anybody occupied any land, we were the land occupiers. That's just a little history lesson. So some of you may know that I did teach that on a very high level. So let me go back to some of this other stuff. Let me talk to you about some of these revolts that happened during the enslavement part of our journey here. In 1712, there was a New York slave uprising. In 1712, there was a New York slave uprising because they felt that we were not supposed to be in these conditions, and they fought back against the oppressor. So in 1712, that happened. Then in 1739, there was the Stono Rebellion. All right, just I'm giving you information. I want you to go do the research. If I sat up here and gave you all that information, you would never ever go and do the research yourself. You would take it for granted, like many of us do on social media. We take what we hear for granted, and then we believe it's truth. And then when we realize it's not the truth, then we say, "Wow, I didn't know." You don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. Right? So I'm going to say that again. You don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. But I'm going to give you a little lesson today on why we are in this particular day and time of the perfect storm of the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay, let me continue. In 1741, it was the New York slave conspiracy that actually, when they tried to bring them over, they turn the tide against the people who were bringing them over. So think about that one. 1741, look that up. And then we heard about, maybe in our historical books, or maybe some of the brothers on the streets, or maybe some of the teachings in some of your mentoring programs will give you the information about the Gabriel Prosser revolt in 1800. Then Agobo Landing mass suicide in 1803 was also a revolt that took place during the enslavement part of people of color, people of African descent in this country. Then the Andrews Rebellion of 1811. Look up that one too. I want you to really look up that one. That one's very interesting. 1811, Andrews Rebellion. Then we might have heard about the Denmark Vesey conspiracy in 1822. Then in 1831, they said the biggest mass revolt of all times in 1831 was the Nat Turner revolt. Then the Amistad Mutiny. Now, some of you may know me who knows that I work for a school called Amistad. We had a mutiny there too. But anyway, I'm going to leave that right where we leave it. But in 1831, they had the 1839, they had the Amistad Mutiny. 1841, they had the Creole case. Now, that's for people who understand what the Creole or the Creole population happened. I mean, how they expanded on their revolution and their revolt against enslavement for, and then the slave revolt in the Cherokee Nation in 1842. Now, let's move on to the antebellum or urban violence. Now, when people talk about riots that happened in the antebellum time, Cincinnati riots in 1829, the anti-abolition riots in 1834. Again, Cincinnati had race riots in 1836, the Pennsylvania Hall Fire in 1838, and the Christina, Pennsylvania riots of 1851. Now, let's go on to the civil rights and the post Reconstruction era violence. In 1863, we had the Detroit race riots. In 1863, we also had the New York City draft riots. 1866, we had the Memphis riots. In 1866, we had the New Orleans massacre. And then in 1868, we had the Pulaski race riots. And 1868, we had the Opalasa massacre. These are things that just happened just during the times that we have been occupied in this land. So we have to understand that this is not new. This is not new. This stuff has been happening. And so what I'm trying to get to the point is that the mechanisms have been in place ever since to keep their what's it called? Their knee on our neck. So we're going to have to change the narrative and change the directive and change the way we are treated in this land by understanding our historical journey. They say you can't know where you're going unless you know from whence you came. So I'm trying to give you a little history on from whence you came. All right, let's talk about the Meridian race riots in 1871, and then the Chillicothe County race war in 1871, the Colfax massacres in 1873, the Clinton, Mississippi riots in 1875, the Hamburg massacres in 1876, the Carroll County Courthouse massacre in 1886, the Thibodeaux massacre in 1887, the New Orleans dock riot workers 1894 to 1895. That took place a whole year. They had race riots against the New Orleans dock workers. The Verdun, Illinois race riots in 1898, excuse me, and the Wilmington race riots in 1898. The Newburgh race riots in New York in 1899. Now let's talk about some of the race riots that took place from 1900 to 1960. Robert Childs riots in New Orleans in 1900, the New York race riots in 1900, the Atlanta race riots in 1906, the Springfield, Illinois race riots in 1908, the East St. Louis race riots in 1917, the Chester, Pennsylvania race riots in 1917, Houston mutiny and race riots in 1917, Pennsylvania police race riots in 1918, the Charleston, South Carolina race riots in 1919, Washington, D.C., Chicago race riots, Knoxville, Tennessee race riots, Elaine, Arkansas race riots, all took place in 1919. In 1921, we had the Tulsa race riots. Okay, that's a little. I'm gonna circle back to that. Though. I want you to remember that. The Rosewood race riots. We saw a movie about that. Rosewood, 1923. The Harlem race riots in 1935. The Beaumont race riots in 1943. The Detroit race riots in 1943, and the Columbia race riots in 1946. Now, let's talk about a few riots that happened in modern time from 1960 to 2000. Let's talk about the Cambridge, Maryland riots in 1963, the Harlem race riots in 1964. You all know what that race riot was for, right? In 1964. The Rochester Rebellion in 1964, the Jersey City Uprising in 1964, the Patterson, Elizabeth, New Jersey, and Chicago riots and Philadelphia race riots in 1964. The Watts Rebellion in 1965, the Cleveland's Howe riots in 1966, the Chicago, Illinois riots in 1966, the Dayton, Ohio uprisings in 1966, the Hunter Point, San Francisco uprising in 1966, the Nashville, the Newark, Plainfield, New Jersey, Detroit, Flint, Michigan, Tucson, Grand Rapids, the King assassination riots all took place in 67 and 68. Even in Hartford, Connecticut, had a riot in 1969. The Asbury Park riots in 1970, Camden, New Jersey, 69 and 71. The Miami Liberty City riots in 1980, Crown Heights, Brooklyn riots of 1991, the Rodney King riots of 1992, West Las Vegas riots of 1992, and the St. Petersburg College, Florida riots of 1996. Now, they also had riots that took place on college campuses. University of Georgia desegregation riot of 1961, the Ole Miss riot of 1962, the Texas Southern University TSU riots of 1967, the Orangeburg massacre of 1968, the Jackson State killings of 1970. Now, we've been sort of engaged into this 2000s because most people who are protesting now are children of the 2000s. And so let's talk about the 21st century radical violence, the Cincinnati riots of 2001. Most people don't even talk about that. That is supposed to be on record to date one of the largest riots that ever took place on the killing of Timothy Thomas, a 19-year-old in Cincinnati. Most people don't even talk about that. I don't even see Timothy Thomas's name sort of mentioned in some of these movements that are taking place because we are such reactive people that we forget some of this stuff. That's why I gave you that long list. This is not something new. This is something that we have to start to change because we shouldn't feel like we are mistreated and then be put in a situation where we have to continually do the same thing because in most cases up until now the most of the times what we've done, we've destroyed our own communities. Does that make sense? I wanted to a little bit. Okay, let's talk about the Oscar Grant Oakland protests in 2009 to 2011, the Ferguson riots and the Ferguson unrest from 2014 to 2015, the Baltimore protests and riots in 2015, Charleston church massacres in 2015, the Milwaukee riots in 2016, and the Charlotte riots of 2016. And now it brings us to a particular time where in 2020, we are here because of the brother in uh, Minneapolis. And so, why is this happening? It all happens because we have not given the opportunity to those who have come behind us to share with them the history of what this country has really, really done with us. Now, racism is something that most people will say, or some people say, I've never experienced it. Well, you don't have to experience it because what happens is that racism doesn't have to be in your face for racism to be a part of the daily environment, which dictates how you function, how you become successful, how you become educated, how you are given the opportunity to have free will of getting what house you want to live in, free will of your credit score, free will of things that make you equal and parallel in this journey called the United States of America. And racism is also something that many of us say, well, nobody's ever exposed me to it. Well, you're exposed to it just like I mentioned, due to the fact that there are some things that have happened over the time that will give you an opportunity to understand why you are in the situations that you are. Do you think that funding to schools in urban areas is because you don't have as many people as small areas who get so much more funding? This is all systematic and we have to change the process. And I'm going to give you some ideas on what I think could change the process. But one of the things I want to also share is that the physical violence has not been something new that has been to America. From 1865 to 1950, recorded now, that's all I want to say, recorded. There have been over 4,500 lynchings that have taken place. And I want to share with everybody that I was listening to a Zoom call the other day, and the Congresswoman from Connecticut, Johanna Hayes, said that in 2019, they just passed Emmett Till anti-lynching law. In 2019, uh, Emmett Till was killed in 1955. And she says that the bill had failed on the floor over 200 times. And so we see what type of people we're allowing and we're electing to be in office. And we believe that there is going to be some fairness in the way the mechanisms are set up for us to succeed. It was never meant for us to succeed. Many of you all who have supported other politicians in the past believe that when you hear that, oh my God, Lincoln was the person who freed the enslaved and that he should be put up on a pedestal based on um, Black historical events. In reality, let me share with you, and I want you to get the book that talks about the plight of Lincoln. And I'm not trying to smear his legacy. What I'm just trying to do is to shine some light on some facts, because we're going to have to understand why we're in this condition. If we don't know why we're in this condition, we'll never know how to get out of this condition. It's almost like the hamster in the wheel. Why does the hamster continue to run on the wheel? Why does he continually run on the wheel? Because it seems that's the only mechanism that gives him the opportunity to feel that he's accomplishing something. And so we're almost like the hamster on the wheel. We have to change the mechanism and the way the mechanism changes us. And so let me talk to you about that. So in 1865, the Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to be passed. But let me share with you something that you may not know. And I'm not going to say it from me uh, what is it, sort of summarizing. I'm going to read it actually from what I believe that I had purchased or that I had found in going back researching the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, let me read this to you. I want to read this to you, and I want you to understand. I'm going to read it twice, or maybe three times, because I want it to sink in. And I want adults out there to share this with your children, your grandchildren, and those that you have the ability to influence. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free all slaves in the United States. Rather, it declared free only those slaves living in states not under Union control. It also tied the issue of slavery directly to the war. So, why do you think states who are under the Confederate control still fight to fly their flags? Let me read this again for you, please. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free all slaves in the United States. Rather, it declared free only those slaves living in states not under Union control. So while a lot of you run around here talking about the Emancipation Proclamation and I love Lincoln for what he did, Lincoln got deathly ill 2 or 3 days before he was supposed to sign that. Lincoln had put in had submitted to the floor of Congress um, to allocate funds to build thousands of ships to ship all African Americans back to Africa before he signed this Emancipation Proclamation. And that was what his real true mission was, is to ship all African Americans back to Africa after he believed and the people of the Congress and the Senate had believed that our services were no longer needed in this particular country. And so for all of you who are running around believing that we are free because of some man's gesture, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because this is some very valuable information I want to share. But I don't want people to think that I'm out here trying to race bait anything. All I'm doing is saying that there's a reason for this particular thing on why the straw out there in the city is the straw in the cities in the other countries is the straw that broke the camel's back. People believe it's brother George Foster. George Foster uh, is a combination of the actions, of the facial expression of the gentleman who performed those actions, of the false information that we're receiving from our government. It's of the indirect or in information that is not proper during the coronavirus. And so many people have been locked up for 3 months. And I think it's just been a boiling point on what's actually trying to happen. So don't tell me Facebook now try to close me down. But we're going to continue going until we get the particular story back, or we get the or we get the audio back, because it doesn't mean that I have to be seen to deliver the information. Correct? So, one of the things that we want to do is talk about that is why the present is what we are in this current condition. And that is why we need to definitely make some changes. And I'm going to give you, I think, a few changes that I think could happen and actually help us to move forward in where we are going. And it's about what we need to do. And it's not based on the fact that we don't protest. I really highly do believe in the protests. And I believe that the protest is necessary for people to have a voice. But I also know that change comes from the executive level. So for all of those mayors, all of those individuals, the governors, all of the state legislators, and the Congress and the Senate individuals who have pledged to look into this information and to make sure that change will happen, we need to hold them accountable, not just at the voting polls, but hold them accountable the entire time they are in office. Make sure that, like Congresswoman Johanna Hayes said, that bills don't reach the floor and fail 200 times until they're passed, and almost 50, 60 years after the actual incident had happened. We need to make those changes currently as we move through this particular process. One of the things is that you have to understand the sacrifice of protesting. What is that going to do for you in the long run? What is going to happen to you once they identify you as being a protester, or you being a looter, or you being a rioter? All of those particular things will constitute what happens to you going forward. You have to make sure that when you do have a voice, you have action and an outcome. You have to make sure that you go and, just as well as you galvanize all these people to protest, get those same amount of people to get to the polls. Now, some of us believe the polls will not work for us, but the only way we're going to find out is get to the polls. Even though you may not like any one of the candidates, you have to exercise your voice to let them know that the people who represent your city are concerned about your outcomes. You have to go and make sure that the people who you elect to change those laws in the Senate and Congress, who live in your communities, are being held accountable for the words that they shared to get your vote. These are things that are definitely going to happen. I know that there are they've blacked me out, but the one thing is that they can't do is they can't stifle my voice, because I've been doing this work for over 40 years, and I will continue to do this work, but I will do it strategically. And I will do it so that the masses get the best out of the outcomes that I could share with you. So again, I want to thank you for joining the Throwback Thursdays. Definitely, if you don't get an opportunity to watch it or you can't share it, please let people know that they can go to the YouTube and subscribe to my channel, Rory T. Edwards, and subscribe to my channel, the one with the picture on it, because there's two Rory T. Edwards channels up there. And subscribe, and then view videos from all of my Throwback Thursdays and other things, interviews, radio interviews, speeches, things that I've done over the course of the years that I've been doing this work. And like those, don't like them, and share them with other people, because the only way we're going to know what we don't know is to find somebody who may be able to help us to know it, and we will get through it. Alrighty, this is your man Rory T. Edwards. I'll be back next Thursday. You can't black me out. You got to realize that if you block out knowledge, then you are part of the problem. All right, it's your man Rory T. Edwards. We'll see you real soon. Thank you all of those who shared. Karina, what's happening, sister, brother Carter? I really appreciate you, and all the other people's. Reverend DuBose, thank you for joining. Again, my twin Terry, thank you, Lillian, and all of those others who may be watching or will get an opportunity to share. We appreciate you. We want you to stay blessed. We want you to stay safe, but we want you to stay cautious, and we want you to stay conscious and woke. Until the next time we talk, you all be blessed.